He opened his mouth wide, exposing sharp teeth, and his throat continued to growl, and his slender tongue continued to waggle. The female student was so frightened that she trembled in place as she watched her teacher turn into a monster, coming at her with her sharp teeth and claws wide open. The monster teacher tugged at her collar with her long fingernails and told her to come over so fiercely that the girl was too scared to open her eyes. Long fingernails slid around her neck, threatening all the students in front of her that whoever dared to talk about suffering and tiredness, this is what would happen to them. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his mouth wide and bit down hard on the neck of his female classmate. Seeing that he was about to see blood, the students hid in the corner and did not dare to move. Their whole body was trembling all over. Some female students were frightened and exclaimed. At this critical moment, the monster teacher somehow frowned to see his movement and didn't bite down in time. He then collapsed to the ground with a thud immediately afterwards, and the others wondered in shock if the teacher was dead. Not far away, a man and a woman were hiding in a corner at this time, peeking at these students, who both took the opportunity to run out on their own. The man in the yellow vest then crept into the house to investigate and found their teacher collapsed on the floor motionless and dead. Immediately after that he looked at the window of the house, where there was clearly a cobweb of cracks in the glass, like the marks of a pistol bullet hole. Not far from the window, on a high building, the man in the jazz cap, pistol in hand, ice cold and fierce, tackled the teacher. The man in yellow with glasses gave him a thumbs up, a sign that the mission had been accomplished and he could retreat. The yellow-haired girl surveyed the creature on the ground, guessing that perhaps it was some sort of suddenly mutated beast like them. When she was ready to go back, the monster on the ground moved and suddenly opened its mouth wide and lunged at the girl. The man in yellow reacted quickly and kicked violently at the creature, cursing under his breath. Is this guy undead? The protective apparatus on his leg was backed by the monster's sharp teeth, which penetrated so hard that the protective apparatus was bitten and leaked continuously. The man in yellow jerked backwards. This guy's bite was too strong. Luckily, he didn't bite directly into his foot. The creature had already bitten something off, but still looked at them with a sinister face and kept hemming and hawing. Seeing this, the unicorn girl quickly spat a mouthful of icicles from her mouth, sweeping towards the monster, freezing it in place and unable to move. The man in yellow complimented her on her good work. What the two didn't expect was for the ice to break and the monster's bite to suddenly explode in place. The two men looked at the flying bats with some disbelief and kept waving their hands to disperse them. On the other side of the red room lit with candles, a whole bunch of bats flew in and kept gathering together. It then slowly converged into a human form, and after a moment of silence in place, grinning his mouth, revealing those sharp white teeth, he kept on grinning wickedly with a cheeky smile. With that, he opened his bloodshot eyes sinisterly and spoke slowly to welcome to the Lucifer's teacher's classroom, and then opened his arms in excitement. This person, just like the monster teacher, a fat boar, holding a big knife, kept smashing the ground with great force. Looking very angry, he kept cursing the damned mole, but it didn't know that the person he was looking for had quietly drilled out behind him. A mole, taking advantage of his surprise, raised his claws menacingly and scratched at the boar's back several times over and over again. But it didn't occur to me that the thick-skinned boar wasn't at all afraid of this small injury, and the skin on its back was still unharmed. The boar spotted him then as well, and quickly turned around and swung the large blade in his hand, which he quickly ducked to avoid. He stretched out his sharp claws, and hated to say that if he poked his eyes out, that would always be a weak spot. The boar frowned in place when he heard that. He was no fool, and quickly covered his eyes with his ears to block the mole's attack. Mole's paw jabbed hard at the pig's ear. He could not believe it. He had not expected him to make this manner. The boar quickly used his meatball ability and bounced him violently with his belly, the mole letting out a sound of pain. Then he fell hard to the ground, unable to get up for a moment. Seeing this, the boar rolled himself quickly into a ball and slammed the mole hard with an impact, trying to smash the mole into the ground. He suddenly, somehow, got stuck in the earth and could only keep rolling in place. He could only stop rolling and lay in a sorry state in the midden, not even knowing when the ground had sunk in. At that moment the mole stretched out his claws and set them hard and fast in the stone. Thereupon he lifted this huge stone high in the air and walked slowly and continuously towards the boar. Didn't you intend to cut me up? I'll pound you first. And with that, I slammed the stone hard into the boar. On the other side, someone quickly cuts down a tree with a chainsaw, and the tree falls with a loud bang. The man in yellow had chainsaws for hands and feet, and he kept swinging his hands to dismantle the woman in front of him. The woman kept dodging, but she didn't realize that there was a dead end behind her, and she cursed in her heart. There was no way out of the yellow man in front of her, as he came at her aggressively, pointing the knife in his hand straight at her. The man grinned sinisterly and slashed at her, calling her a traitor, and the redhead quickly reached out her arm to block. At this point in time, The two men were still looking at the spot in amazement as the bat gradually disappeared, slowly revealing a human form. Lucifer is back again, opening his mouth to threaten them. Letting my students go. The loss will have to be recovered from you. But before he could finish his sentence, he was instantly shot in the head again by a snapping shot. Once again, before he could finish his sentence, he died again and collapsed on the ground. The two men beside him looking at him speechlessly. The two men looked at his body and asked with some confusion if he was dead too this time, and just tried to say something about it. The man in yellow accused Arthur. You're moving too fast. At least let the person finish his sentence. Arthur, who was standing on a high building, shrugged unconcernedly. He hadn't expected the man to be so easy to kill either, but immediately after the body on the ground changed into a bat again, and the girls covered their mouths, not realizing that he was still alive, realizing that the man was a vampire, and that ordinary bullets couldn't kill him. The bat then broke through the window and flew towards the outside. The vampire stormed towards Arthur, opening his mouth in anger and threatening him. I'm a chicken if I don't take care of the tiger. He turned into a bat and attacked Arthur, who hurriedly rolled behind him to avoid it. The vampire Lucifer followed the army of bats towards him, staring fiercely warning him not to try to escape. He was knocked down hard by an army of bats, and was about to plant himself on the ground, so he quickly reached out to use his ability. With that, he transformed into an oversized balloon and blocked the bat's attack by graying between them. Still, a bat slipped in carelessly, and Arthur reacted quickly to the sight, so he hastily reached out to block it, then stamped his foot hard on the bat's body, controlling its movement. Lucifer was outside staring at the big pink bag, laughing at Arthur, saying he was just a coward who would hide. Just then the man in yellow appeared, and when Lucifer wasn't looking, he spread his wings. His feet turned into sharp claws, and he reached out and shot his feet to attack him with weapons. Before Lucifer could react, his eyes were glued shut and he couldn't see what was happening in front of him, so he could only stand frowning in place. The man in yellow threw out his own wings and his palms turned into sharp claws, slashing swiftly and ferociously towards Lucifer. The vampire Lucifer, again blinded by his eyes being glued shut, looked about to hit, but his senses were sharp and he dodged just in time to avoid. The man in yellow saw that he was fine like this, and his eyes widened in some surprise. Bats don't even need eyes to see. They're just stupid. And after that he summoned another swarm of bats and attacked the man. Just as he was concentrating on preparing for the man in yellow, Sasha took advantage of his inattention and slowly approached towards Lucifer's back. Lucifer looks back in confusion as Sasha turns into a dragon and spits an icicle at him. But Lucifer tells her that moves don't work on me because the vampire's heart was darker than the night. He summoned a large group of bats and charged towards the dragon lady. Then he crept close behind the dragoness and told her that his blood was colder than the cold of winter. The freezing move was useless against himself, and exaggeratedly opened his own mouth wide, trying to bite the dragon lady's tail viciously. But I didn't expect to open my mouth to bite down, and have my fangs cracked open by the hard tail, instantly screaming in agony and pain. He didn't expect this dragon lady's tail to be so tough. The dragon lady smiled smugly from the sidelines. Her skills in this state had been enhanced by Xuan Wu's power. His fangs were completely ineffective against her. Vampire Lucifer covered his mouth in pain. Since he couldn't bring back the Xuan Wu blood, then bring back something related to Xuan Wu. He didn't know what the hell he was playing at, and in an instant, his eyes turned bloodshot, and he used his powers. The dragon lady didn't know what he meant by that, and in a moment of inadvertence, she was bewitched by him. In a moment of ecstasy, the vampire Lucifer took control of Sasha, who landed obediently in front of him, already mesmerized and very much at his beck and call. Lucifer reached for Sasha's faucet and smiled wickedly and sinisterly. Be good and I'll take you back. He got what he came for. Birdman, who was furious to see the scene in front of him, called him a real bastard and questioned him about what he had done to Sasha. Lucifer didn't mind his words at all, pointing his finger out at the Birdman and commanding Sasha to go and finish him off, which Sasha did as she was told and rushed over to him, quickly spitting a mouthful of icicles out of his mouth. He punched at the Birdman, who was taken aback and quickly flew to avoid the blow. He dodged and flew to avoid Sasha's attacks while shouting there, trying to rouse Sasha's sanity, but she wouldn't even listen to it. Birdman landed at speed by Arthur's pink balloon and kept flapping, shouting that something big had happened and that I should go in and hide too. But before Arthur inside could hear it, Sasha's successive icicle attacks fell at him. Thinking that it was all over, his own people had been bewildered. Inside, Arthur tells Birdman that silver bullets are being made, but that there are limited materials to make only one, and that silver bullets work on vampires. And on the other side of the forest, there was a constant rumbling sound of rocks being used to hit the ground. Mo was still holding the boulder high in the air, slamming it hard into that huge pit, shaking the ground with a constant rumble. He felt that the boar inside should be dead through, so he casually threw the stone to the ground. Exhausted and panting, he peered into the pit and shouted excitedly, wondering if the pig had been pounded into a meatloaf yet. But it didn't expect the pit to be empty long ago. His voice was unbelievable. How was it empty? He had clearly trapped him in the pit. Mo was still a little incredulous, so he looked around for the pig, wondering where the hell he had gone. Just then behind him, a large knife rumbled through the ground and came slashing at his back, looking like it wanted to cut Mo in half. He was startled, but Mo had heard the sound and turned back quickly, and immediately stretched out his arm, trying to block the great knife. But the knife was too heavy, pressing dead against him, closer and closer to his head. Soon the helmet on Mo's head was still split open, and with a thud, crashed swiftly to the ground, and inside it turned out to be a bald-headed older man. He blushed a little. It was bad. The helmet was gone, and he had no way of breathing when he dug himself into the ground. When the greatsword was withdrawn, suddenly break through the ground, violently drilled out a thick hand. The boar inside the smug laugh. Don't think you're the only one who knows how to hit the hole. Finally the smoke cleared, and he brought the whole pig in the pit he had dug, and said with a smug look on his face, "Don't you know that pigs also are true for the earth?" After saying that, he used his fat body again, flexible and fierce, drilling into the soil. While drilling the soil, said, "Let you taste the power of the big grandfather me." As soon as he had finished speaking, he raised the great sword in his hand and broke through the ground, coming at Mo in a swift manner. Immediately after that, he used the flesh and that bone crusher still. The ground rumbled and shook, and the blade in his hand continued to rotate and slash at the mole. Mole was cut down violently by his unforeseen spinning blade and tipped over on the ground, a sound of pain escaping his lips. Before he could get up, it came at him again swiftly, and to his surprise the knife could curve. Realizing that there was no escape, but adamantium coins are the hardest material in the world. They don't hurt, they don't itch, they are invulnerable to fire and water. With such equipment, he could not defeat him, so he met him head-on, and could not bear his broken iron. The boar's spinning blade kept rubbing against his arm, and because of the high friction between the two weapons, sparks immediately flew up. His back foot kept firing, intending to break the car, trying to resist the brute force. The thick armor of the mole and the spinning blade of the boar were constantly rubbing against each other, both sides battling it out. The bald uncle shouted with force and fury, his eyes bursting into brilliant fire. On the other side of the room, the red-haired woman was fighting the old man with a chainsaw, who laughed and provoked her. "Is that all she can do? I also thought that your so-called rebirth can be a bit stronger, but the result is not still the 5 dregs of the war. It is true that scrap iron is scrap iron." As soon as the words were out of his mouth, he slashed the chainsaw in his hand at the redhead, who quickly doubled over to avoid the blow. He turned and leapt quickly onto the branch, then quickly turned back and slashed at the old chainsaw man with the 2 scimitars in his hands. Immediately afterwards she steadied herself again and landed lightly on a branch, then supported herself on it with her hands, but still staring down at the tree with all her alertness, deathly staring at the 2 attacks he had struck out. He saw that they were about to land on the old man's body, but then he sidestepped and avoided them. Old man Chainsaw knew what he was trying to do. He was trying to distance himself and attack remotely. But don't underestimate yourself. He can attack remotely too. After saying that, the chainsaw in his hand was like a frisbee, and he cut hard at the woman. Then the woman hit 2 more attacks to cut up. The redhead realized something was wrong, and watched as the chainsaw flew towards her, cutting through the branches at speed, practically chipping away at them. She was startled, and hastily ducked on another branch before she could steady herself, and again by the chainsaw that came immediately after, cutting from above his head and snapping off the branch above his head. The branch landed in front of her, and after quickly sidestepping to avoid it, she realized that a long-range attack like that wasn't an option either, so quickly ducked behind the huge tree so that he wouldn't, like being a frisbee, get hit and hit. Chainsaw old man saw that she actually did not fight with himself, but even hid, voice angry, want to play hide and seek. "I will not let you escape." After saying that, he quickly threw all the chainsaws on his body and threw them out, and wherever the chainsaws went, they cut all the trees into a section, constantly turning in the air, cutting down tree after tree, but never seeing the red-haired woman, wondering where he'd gone hiding. The old man with the chainsaw then quickly stopped moving and looked at the empty space in front of him, full of the remains of trees. His face was dark and sullen, his voice indignant as he shouted where the hell the man had gone, and he was gnashing his teeth with anger, just as he accidentally let his guard down. A sword oar came at him swiftly from the side, and the old man was taken by violent surprise. But I didn't expect that one sword energy to quickly cut off the instrument he was carrying behind him, which definitely didn't work anymore, emitting a burst of black smoke. The chainsaw, which was rotating rapidly in the air, also fell to the ground at that moment, and the old man, looking at the scene in front of him, did not react, and suddenly frowned in place. The redhead looked at him faintly, and told him with a blank face that she was just getting used to this new body, and so far it was only okay. But upon hearing this, the old man only grunted and left in place, not moving a muscle, while black smoke continued to emanate from him. But the woman looked at him with a shocked look on her face, wondering what he meant by that, and if the man was crazy. This old man slowly turned around. I didn't realize that half of his face was made of machinery. He smiled stiffly. My whole body is also a mechanical robot, and your little stunt just rubbed my skin a little at best. And now that the game's over, it's not going to let you guys get away with snitching. Otherwise the Oshinkaku would have demolished us. His eyes constantly glowing as he controlled the chainsaws that fell to the ground, keeping them suspended in there. The chainsaw kept rotating in the air at high speeds, and then quickly burst into flames, burning red with a constant buzzing vibration. A cold sweat broke out on the redhead's cheeks, and she looked at him a little nervously, wondering what the old man's operation was. So she had to take her chances. Just shoot a red laser beam out of your left eye and tell him, with a smile on your face, to show you something funny. With lasers in his eyes and a constantly spinning and burning chainsaw, the last key charged at the woman. The blazing fire carried by the chainsaw quickly ignited the thick branches of the forest in the blink of an eye. It kept spinning in the forest, burning a fire. The redhead was hit in the chest by that one red laser. She didn't have time to dodge it but was unharmed and wondered what it was doing. The old chainsaw man told her at this point that once locked onto my ray, the teeth of the saw would hold their prey in a deadly grip until it was shredded and scorched to death. Now I burn all the surrounding trees. Let's see how you can still hide. Don't you like to jump around the trees like a monkey? You jump. You're just waiting to be cut into pieces. Blah blah blah. The woman heard him say this without the slightest panic. Who would be obediently tied up? So he stretched out his left hand too. The words just fell on the left hand claw, turned into a blue lightsaber to block the old man's attack. The old man was her operation, amused by this, laughing. But I did not expect that the sawtooth unexpectedly from her side, with thick flames, flew over to the woman, has approached the woman in front of, was startled so hastily bent his arm, stretched out the sword in his hand, to block to their own high-speed rotation flew over the sawtooth. But it is simply too late. Her right arm was sliced into by the rapidly rotating serrated teeth, and the woman looked on with a grimace as they grazed past her head. The woman's arm fell to the ground. The old man saw this and smiled smugly. Let's just say you're no match for me. I'll see how you die. Inside the huge high-rise building, a man in a suit was sitting on a sofa, looking at the images of the operation of these people in front of him, pondering. The blue-haired girl with a double ponytail beside her said, "It doesn't look like it's going to well, so let's hurry up and call back." When he heard the girl's words, he didn't respond in time, but just reached out and picked up the coffee cup that was placed on the table and took a slow sip before speaking. To deal with a powerful enemy, it's inevitable to encounter emergency situations. Even if we can't deal with these, we might as well just submit to the great god's pavilion. And that's when Sasha, still delirious, attacked the friendlies, constantly shooting a stream of icicles out of her mouth at the birdmen in there. Birdmen panicked and flew around in the air, constantly shouting loudly to try and wake her up. "Sasha, you're bewitched. Wake up." However, he was still careless and was violently struck by the icicle on his left wing, and he kept letting out screams of misery. It was too icy, and this was too icy. His left wing was rapidly flouncing by the icicles, causing him to be unable to fly in the air and only fall down with a shocking cry. Eventually fell hard to the ground, not constantly rolling over and crying out in pain. After rolling around a few times, he quickly got up and was half on his knees when he realized that Sasha had closed in on him, hissing at him with her mouth wide open. Birdman was taken aback by Sasha's jolt. In that case, he could only use that move himself, which was really uncontrollable in terms of strength. It was also the reason why he had to wear earmuffs himself, but it couldn't be helped. Maybe it would clear Sasha's head a bit. The Birdman spread his great feathered wings and kept on vibrating them at a rapid rate, making a buzzing noise, and finally shaking the ice off his wings. He looked at Sasha with a serious expression and his eyes firmly made the decision that he was going to have to make that move himself. Birdman kept vibrating his wings, and after flying through the vibrations, a huge tornado was quickly formed, a move called the impact sonic boom. Sasha was taken aback by his move, so she looked sideways in confusion. Too late to dodge the struck violently on her body. She let out a cunning sound of pain, struggling in the air as she continued to. With a final boom, it fell hard to the ground, stirring up a puff of smoke. After the smoke cleared, Sasha had regained her human form by this time, unable to stop coughing on the ground from the beating, and had come to her senses. Inside the pink balloon at that moment, Arthur held aloft in his hands the silver bullet he had so painstakingly made, and he was very excited. Just then the vampire Lucifer, outside the pink balloon, grinned sinisterly and shrilly, as if he'd found some kind of breakthrough. He slowly stretched out his pale hand, then used his ability to shape-shift, quickly turning it into a cone shape that was sharp like a needle. With that he reached out with his pointy arm, and quickly poked Arthur's protective airbag, and Arthur looked at the scene before him in surprise and disbelief. Lucifer evilly grinned wickedly outside, and kept reaching out to stab inside the airbag. Then he turned his body into a pointy shape as well, trying to follow the hole it poked out with his hand and burrow into it. At last he burrowed in with his whole head, grinning grimly, showing his pointed teeth, and greeting the people, and trying to hide for how long. And Arthur, seeing that he had burrowed in by himself, had really thrown himself into the net, and saved himself the trouble of looking for him, raised the shotgun in his hand against his head. Then with a bang, it quickly shot through his forehead, and Lucifer, shouting in incredulity that it was actually a silver bullet, kept raging against him. Arthur had, by this time, tumbled out the other side of the airbag, thankful that he had hit it, and fortunate to have finished making it in time. And Lucifer at this time wailed continually in agony, and held his head high, having been continually petrified from the head of the Arthur, with his head slightly bowed on the sidelines, looked grimly at Lucifer. Oh, in the condition he was in before him, knew that he had sort of done it. Lucifer's entire body had been petrified and was breaking apart, when suddenly the petrified head fell off it. It fell to the ground in a flash, and was instantly in pieces. Arthur crouched on the sidelines, sure that Lucifer was dead, and was happy that he had finally taken care of the big trouble. But at that moment, the petrified Lucifer spoke up. Did he think that the chicken had successfully killed me, and that what he had hit was only my doppelganger? Lucifer evilly told him that my main body is only one of them, but without hitting the main body, it's just futile to kill any more doppelgangers. And at this time, flying into the sky branches, bats continued to converge again into a human figure. Lucifer was unharmed. He opened his sharp teeth and grinned. You've lost a great opportunity now. His eyes instantly turned scarlet, and he looked at him warningly. Not to tangle with you, and not to let you leave here alive anyway. Sacrifice all of your blood to me. He opened his bloody mouth and charged violently towards Arthur. Just then an ice sword appeared just in time, and lurched towards Lucifer's back. He ran hard through his upper body, pinning him firmly to the ground, and he let out a scream of agony, completely unsure of this situation in front of him now. This was actually ice. Hadn't the person already been controlled by himself? But before he could get back to his senses, Birdman appeared behind him. He quickly used the impact sonic boom and slammed it again towards Lucifer. Lucifer was in the middle of a sonic boom of impact. He was so disfigured by the high speed of his spinning that he couldn't speak at all. Gradual style was not good. His body quickly exploded into a bat, and the icicle sword on his body broke as a result. Sasha transformed into the shape of a dragon, gathering energy in her mouth, and then violently shot out a pillar of ice at these bats flying around haphazardly, pinning some of the bats hard to the ground. Lucifer couldn't even fight back from them, and opened his mouth to curse. His face panicked. Cold sweat kept slipping down his face. What was that sound wave that just happened? And that mother dragon had broken through the illusion spell. The old man and Sasha, seeing that the situation was already closing in on their side, kindly answered his questions. You're a bat, so you must be afraid of sonic interference as well. As long as all the doppelgangers are under control, the main body will be exposed. Hearing this, Lucifer was furious. It's just nonsense. To people, he was still not dead. Finish the next words. Just kill part of the split. And with Lucifer still bluffing there, the remaining doppelgangers would keep shrinking in size, even if they converged into one again. Sasha's eyes are fierce. There aren't that many of your doppelgangers at all. Kill one and you'll have one less. Just a few more rounds and what's left will be the main body. Birdman cried out with a flourish for another sonic boom, so he kept revving his wings and swirling the gale. Lucifer's face was ugly. He was still stiff upper lip stinking at them. He wouldn't be taken down so easily by you guys. Instantly his face turned into the shape of a bat. His voice screamed shrilly, and then his whole body turned into a bat as well. Lucifer spread his great wings and began to flap them over over and over again, shouting at them in warning. Arthur saw this and hurriedly reminded the two people around him that he had deformed and was ready to amplify his moves. Everyone must be careful, and all of them stared at him warily. But what people didn't expect was that he actually vibrated his wings into the air behind him and flew out quickly. He was actually trying to escape. Several people were silent for a while in the same place and made a quick decision, changing out of their original forms and chasing after them. Birdman unleashed another impact-side boom, shooting several smaller bats in the air, but Lucifer quickly blew up again to dodge coming. This was closely followed by Sasha charging over, spitting icicles out of her mouth and shooting them at the scattered bats. The swarm of bats continued to fall from the icicle shots, and inside the few that remained, they finally spotted the main body. It was the one with the red glowing eyes. Lucifer felt humiliated. Being chased by a couple of brats was a real laugh when he said it. Arthur was sitting on Sasha's back at this point, gun held high in his hand, and with a serious look on his face he told Sasha, "I can aim at him." Lucifer looked at the guns in front of him and was panicked and kept vibrating his wings. This was really going to get him killed. Someone please come and save him. At this critical moment, a large swarm of bats suddenly appeared in front of us. A swarm of bats feeding at night. God help me. This time there is help. Eyes instantly glowing red as he stared at the bats. He began to use his ability to turn me into black mist. Instantly the swarm of bats came together, and they became a pitch-black cloud of smoke resting in the air, and Lucifer saw that he had succeeded in quickly darting over. As long as he hid himself in the black mist that reached out, others rushing in would only be unable to get out like a ghost hitting the wall. At this point, Arthur's eyes firmly locked Lucifer's fleeing figure. He sneered, "Not everyone needs sight." Just then on the other side of the room, Mole was still reaching out, constantly blocking the rapidly spinning blade, and his arm was already red with burns. "If this continues, I'm afraid I'll be fused, even though I can't feel any pain. But if I leave at this point, I'm sure I won't be able to dodge in time and get hit by the splits." In the middle of the dilemma, the blade suddenly stopped above his arm and didn't move. While Mole was puzzled, a layer of dust suddenly lifted up underneath them. The boar fought his way up. His face was in pain. He kept screaming it was so hot. The machete was burning red. Seth quickly threw away the blade in his hand, constantly crying out in pain. Mo watched from the sidelines, not realizing that this guy was actually afraid of heat. Then he thought of an excellent idea. He stretched up his hands and then clenched his fists. His eyes stared fiercely at the fat pig in front of him, slightly pulling the corners of his mouth. Then he would not be polite, and when he finished, he stretched out a punch fiercely, hitting the fat pig in the face. He didn't even have time to dodge before his face was swollen, and he kept letting out painful pig squeals. Mole froze the feast of barbecue, punching the fat pig in the face with punch after punch, looking like he's ready to smash the pig's head. The boar planted himself hard on the ground in a sorry state. His eyes closed tightly and it looked like he couldn't get up anymore. He had his big peaky mouth open. His eyes were dead, and it looked like he was already dying. The bald uncle looked at the pig in front of him, which had been scalded and smoked all over. He made a victory pose very happily. This battle was considered to be won, but he was a little worried right after that. So he looked towards the distant mountains, wondering if that female robot could manage on her own. The red-haired female robot is now woefully avoiding the speeding gears. Quickly she shot a hook from her wrist and nailed it to a stone aside, and flew violently trying to bring herself out of the encirclement. And that's when the laser in Old Man Chainsaw's left eye stayed locked on her. Laughing excitedly, "You can't get away." The red-haired woman frowned for a moment when she heard him say this, and was then taken aback by the sudden crisis that struck her before her eyes. The flaming gears in the distance were turning the corner, hacking at the redhead in a steady stream. Seeing that it was bad, he straightened that instep, activated the mechanism on his ankle, and fired 3 bullets from it. The 2 weapons clashed together with a loud clang, but also blocked the attack quickly and ruthlessly. The woman hid her form in the rolling smoke, but the old man with the chainsaw hemmed and hawed and laughed at her, only playing smart. As soon as he spoke, a small missile quickly broke through the smoke and hurled towards the Old Man Chainsaw. The old man smiled grimly, not seeing this little trick of hers at all, telling him that it was no use at all and to stop wasting time doing useless things. So he maneuvered the high-speed gears, and they quickly swung back around, pinning and slashing at the small missile. The two collided together, chopping up the small missile with a loud explosion. The old man provoked her. "This little trick is not enough to be afraid of. What tricks you have to show? Any weapon this master can easily block it." He even told the woman that his thighs were made of fuel tanks, and that after filling up with fuel he could start at full power for 3 days. The woman slowly revealed half of her face in the smoke. I really have to thank you for telling me about your weaknesses. I was worried about not having the chance to do it. Look at my feet. The old man looked at the broken arm on the ground with some surprise. He was surprised that he did not even know that this thing went in his feet, and just then, the arm on the floor activated the mechanism on the arm. The old man didn't realize it was bad. It was too close. The woman frowned slightly with a fierce look in her eyes, thinking that the arm was just cut off. I did it on purpose. And now you've entered the attack range. The old man couldn't dodge it at all, and only had time to curse as a small missile shot out of his arm. Eyes horrified, he watched the small missiles coming at him. In an instant, the small missile shattered the old man into a pile of scrap metal, with a bunch of parts falling to the ground, and by this time the blazing fire he had set himself had engulfed him in it, and he was afraid that he would have melted long ago. The redhead moved her arm, and asked Sasha softly if she was done, if she needed you to put out the fire.